Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Peaceful Discipline workshop. Put in, oh, awesome. Everybody's already, I was just gonna say, put in the chat where you're calling in from, and I see people have already done that. Hi, Janina from Ontario. There's about a 15-second lag from when you write something to when I see it. So Janina from Ontario, hello, and Jane from Montreal, and Kath says hello. Kath says good morning, good evening, so maybe Kath is another time zone. Welcome to our Peaceful Discipline workshop. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour. I know we all have busy lives, and I am going to save time, hopefully within the hour, for a Q&A. So I'm going to move fast. You might want to take some notes. Hi, Chloe. Hi, Kendra. Hi, Audrey. Hi, Barty. Nice to see some familiar faces. Last night when I did this workshop, my computer crashed in the middle of the workshop. I had to restart, and when I came back, the webinar was still going. Like, it didn't end the webinar because it's web-based. So fingers crossed, now that I've prepared you, it probably won't happen, but fingers crossed, if I disappear, I'll be back in a minute. Just hang on. Now that I've said it, I probably did a Murphy's Law insurance against it happening. We are going to get started in just about 1 minute. Let's wait till 12:03. And nice to see so many people showing up. I am going, as I said, I'm going to do a Q&A at the end. If questions occur to you while we're talking, you can put them in the chat, and I'll look at them at the end. So let's dive in. Let me grab my slide presentation. I'm actually gonna turn off my camera just because I find it distracting to look at myself, but I am still going to be here. Okay, so here we are. Let's just turn off my camera. Let's see. And for some reason, I don't see you. Oh, start. Hit start. That'll help. Okay, so we're talking about raising great kids without yelling, threats, or consequences. I'm Sarah Rosensweet. Many of you already know me. I just wanted to let you know what we're doing tonight. We're going to do the Limits workshop, or today, rather, the Limits workshop. I'm going to tell you about my parenting course. I know sometimes when I come to free workshops and then at the end, they're telling me about an offer, I feel a little bit surprised. So I just wanted to be upfront right away that I am going to be talking about my course. This workshop, though, is very valuable on its own. I have been paid to teach this exact same workshop at schools and HR, like at companies. So don't worry, just because I'm going to tell you about the course doesn't mean that you're not getting something of value for free. I have a small download gift for you at the end, and then we're going to do a live Q&A. So let's dive in. We're going to be talking about peaceful discipline, that's what it's called. And what we're going to be focusing on is why consequences don't work and what we want to do instead. So if you have an intense kid, sometimes we call them the kids who are a little bit more or extra, those kids who are strong-willed, sensitive, neurodivergent, or, otherwise, I'm sure I'm forgetting some categories. Strong-willed, sensitive, spirited, neurodivergent, or maybe you're new to peaceful parenting, and kids are known to misbehave, right? They're small and inexperienced, and they lack impulse control, and they haven't had the life experience yet. So you may have been in the grocery store and having a kid having a meltdown in the grocery store or at the park, and your kid is hitting you, having a meltdown, and maybe you've been told, or at least been able to infer that this is what people are thinking, that your kid needs discipline, right? And so discipline, we often think of as like the traditional meaning of discipline, or what it's come to mean is punishment. Like, we've got to make somebody feel bad to learn, right? And discipline also often means fear, that that kids should be a little bit afraid of their parents so that they stay in line. That's traditionally what we think about as discipline. But discipline really means to teach, right? The Latin root of the word is, I think it might be to learn, but it really means to teach. So yes, your child does need discipline. They need learning, right? They don't need consequences to learn. And we don't want our kids to be afraid of us. That causes all sorts of problems later on when they get in trouble, or like literally have a problem, and they don't come to us because they're afraid of us. It's a lot of the sad stories I've heard of kids who are being like blackmailed online, who take their own lives because they're afraid to tell anybody. And I would bet you that a lot of those kids were raised with traditional discipline. They were afraid that they would be in trouble. So if even if you were to use consequences, even if you could control your child through consequences, some kids are just consequence averse. They don't care. Like whatever you say, I'm going to do this to you. They don't care. I remember this client I was working with who was doing peaceful parenting, but her husband wasn't. She relayed this story to me about their 4-year-old who was very strong-willed, and the husband was trying to get the 4-year-old to put her pajamas on, I think. And she wouldn't. And he kept saying, okay, well, no shows for you tomorrow. And she was like, I don't care. And then he said, no shows for you for 2 days then. And she said, I don't care. And then the dad said, you don't care about your shows? And she said, I don't care about you. Right. So that's one thing we're going to be talking about, those long-term effects using fear and consequences. They don't even work. Sometimes they can work in the short term. But also, if we use consequences because we want our child to obey us, right? If you don't do this, then X, I'm going to do this to you. And when you think about obedience, it is a very attractive trait to think about a 4-year-old who just does what you say, right? It's very convenient to think about the 4-year-old who does what you say. But really, do you want obedient to be a trait that your child has when they're grown up? Like, is that something that's important to you? I really want my child to just do what other people tell them to do when they're grown up. Probably not. So we want to learn how to discipline with love, right? Teaching with love instead of fear. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Keep saying tonight, I guess, because of last night. So I have 10 years of experience as a coach. I've coached hundreds of families and worked with thousands of families through my membership and my courses. And also I'm a mom. So I have been doing this work both professionally and personally. Those are my kids. They're now 20, 20, and 16. And they have never once been punished in their lives. And they are amazing kids. I'm just going to check the chat and make sure that someone's saying they have to reconnect every 10 seconds. Is anybody else having that issue? I'm not seeing anyone else saying that, Mary. So it might be your your internet connection, but good luck. I don't think it's on this end unless other people say it is. I'll keep an eye out. So my kids have never once been punished. Doesn't mean I've been happy with every single thing that they've ever said or done. Generally, though, they have been really, really good kids. They're kind, intelligent, hardworking. Well, intelligence, I don't think that has anything to do with peaceful parenting, but they're kind and hardworking. Okay, Chloe says no issue for me. Mary, I hope you can get it. Yeah, I'm really sorry that's happening for you. I will be sending out the recording if you can't get it to work, but I think it's working for other people, so it might be your connection. So I'm sorry that's happening. But my kids, my middle son, the one on the left, he took a gap year after high school and worked construction, and his boss went on and on. His boss, who'd been in the industry for over 40 years, went on and on about how he'd never had a worker like him. In fact, he put him in charge of the crew after 3 months, and he was brand new, but he was such a leader and so responsible and so hardworking and he just told me he still works for the same guy. He's starting full time again now that school's done. And he just told me that his boss gave him a $5 an hour raise when he didn't even ask for it. So that's just an example to show you, like, kids who are raised with peaceful parenting going out in the world, not having ever been punished, and they turned into great kids. And it's not that I'm, I'll say, you've heard me say this on the podcast, I'm not a special unicorn, neither are my kids. It's just peaceful parenting. So I just want to locate us to talk about what our lens is. We're not going to be talking much about all of the big ideas of peaceful parenting, mainly one, but just so you know, in case you're new to peaceful parenting is 3 big ideas. Regulating our own emotions, which is always where we start. And that doesn't mean that we never get upset. It just means that when we learn to recognize when we're getting upset, or calm ourselves after we've already gotten upset, so that we can respond to the situation that's happening rather than reacting and taking things out on our kids. Our response is always about our own trigger in the moment rather than what our kid does. And if we do lose it, which is also totally normal, we do a repair, right? So our kid knows that it's not that there's something wrong with them. It's our challenge to take care of our own feelings. The second big idea is a focus on connection and our relationship with our child. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And the third big idea, which is where we're really going to be focusing today, which is sort of like I just want to say the fringiest part of the approach, is kind, firm limits with lots of empathy and no punishment. So this is a graphic that I've developed to show the different parts of peaceful parenting that I see that sort of expands on it a little bit. Self-regulation is the foundation. As I said, that's where we always start. Connection is the trunk. This holds everything else up. And then around the branches of the tree, you can see other skills that we really need to work on and understand. And I would say self-compassion is a skill. It doesn't come naturally. But we're going to be talking about setting limits and a little bit about building cooperation today. But all of these pieces work together as a whole to make up the peaceful parenting approach. So a mindset shift before we start. Kids are doing the best they can. They want to be good. If you can't believe this, I just want you to stop and just like if you're doing the dishes or whatever, if you can't believe that this is true, it's going to be very hard for you to do peaceful parenting. The people that I've seen who have not been successful, really, when I say successful in terms of like being able to embrace the approach, they don't deep down believe that kids are doing the best they can and that they want to be good. And this is actually, this is a pretty unusual idea in our culture. Like even when I was in teachers college, I was taught catch them being good as if their natural state was to be bad. They were supposed to catch kids being good. So we're wired for connection. Evolutionarily, we have developed as a connection as our survival strategy. So if we weren't connected to a caregiver, if the floods came or a fire came or whatever, back in prehistoric days, we would be left on a rock somewhere. So connection is what makes us get taken care of by another person. And humans need that caregiving for the first number of years of their lives. So we're actually really wired to seek connection and to act in accordance with connection with our caregivers. So if kids are acting out of alignment with that, breaking the rules, being difficult, having meltdowns, like whatever, that's unconscious. But, if kids are having a hard time or being difficult, it's because there's something else going on, right? They really want to be good. Our job is to figure out what is that something else that's going on? What is it that's making it hard for them to be good? I'm saying good in quotation marks. So really, this is a mindset shift that's super important for peaceful parenting. Even if this is like the only thing that you really take away from this workshop, that is a very valuable takeaway. They want to be good. If we operate from a place of they're doing the best they can and they want to be good, we're going to be more patient. We're going to be more compassionate. We're going to be able to stay calm ourselves more because we don't believe they're giving us a hard time, but they're having a hard time. And then we can also look for, okay, if they're not being, quote, good, why? What else is going on? Just going to have a little sip of my tea. So we're going to define our terms so that you understand what we're talking about. So consequences are, and also, as I said before, also known as punishment. Nobody really wants to say, though, the punishment is going to be. So people generally talk about consequences because I think it sounds a little bit nicer. But consequences or punishment is something that you do to a child or you threaten to do to a child to make them feel bad, to teach them a lesson or change their behavior. So that's our definition of consequences. Natural consequences are totally different. So a natural consequence is something that happens without any involvement from us. That is the key to tell the difference between natural consequence, a consequence, and a limit, which we're going to be talking about later. It happens with no involvement from us. So in my Facebook group, sometimes I'll hear people say, what should the natural consequence for this be? If you have to stop and ask yourself that question, it is not a natural consequence. So if you go outside with no umbrella, you get wet. If you forget your lunch, you're hungry. If you throw a toy in anger and it breaks, your toy is broken. Those are the natural consequences. If you hit your brother is hurt and you feel bad and your caregiver might be annoyed with you. Those are all the natural consequences. So natural consequences are really great learning tools. So, you've got your 3-year-old in the stroller and they want to hold their helium balloon and you say, maybe it's a good idea. Let's tie it around your wrist or tie it to the stroller. No. They want to hold it themselves. And the balloon flies away. They forget to hold on to it. So they have just learned, boy, I really should tie it to my wrist or the stroller if I want to keep my balloon, right? What we really have to watch out for with natural consequences is a tendency anywhere from I told you so to actually making a child feel bad about their bad decision. I call that piling on. And often parents, even when they're well-meaning, tend to do this because they want the child to learn from the natural consequence. This is the thing though, when you're piling on, you're not on your child's side, or they don't perceive that you're on their side. And any negative feelings they're having about like the loss of the balloon will get then channeled into you, right? My mom or dad's being mean and telling me I told you so because my balloon flew away. Instead of feeling like, the disappointment of the balloon flying away, they can focus that on you, and it's actually going to prevent the learning from happening, and it's going to hurt your relationship, and maybe make them feel some shame. So that's one thing we really want to watch out for with natural consequences. I want to go over. There are probably about 10 reasons why we don't want to use consequences. I've highlighted, I think, 4 of them in this workshop. If you're interested, interested in the research, I'm putting an author in the chat here. The work of Alfie Kohn really goes through the research about punishment and rewards, which is the flip side of punishment. Our culture really wants to believe that punishment and rewards work to change behavior long term. Study after study has shown that they do not work to change behavior long term, and they don't teach the lessons that we intend. So if you're interested in the research, check out Alfie Kohn's work. He's really the why of peaceful parenting without much of the how-to. So I'll just warn you about that. But one of the first big reasons, as I just said, why we don't want to use consequences is because they don't work. And there are a few reasons for that, I think, but there have been studies, that one study showed that 2-year-olds who were given timeouts were actually worse behaved in a year than 2-year-olds who were not given timeouts. And I think a big part of the reason why punishment doesn't work sometimes is because it doesn't look at the root cause of the problem. So, let's look at hitting. If you have one sibling who's hitting the other sibling, and you say, okay, I'm gonna, take away your iPad or no dessert tonight or whatever because you hate your brother. It could be that might work if the child is older and they have impulse control. But if the child is younger and they don't have impulse control, it probably won't work anyways. But you've also just missed looking at what the root of the problem is. Is it sibling rivalry that you need to work on the sibling question? Is it that your children need some help in conflict negotiation? Is it that you need to stay close by if something is, starting to go sideways so that people don't get out of control? So really, like, why is there hitting happening? And let's look at the reason why. Looking at what the root of the problem is what's really going to help change the behavior. Another reason why we don't want to use consequences is because they really teach the wrong lesson. They teach the opposite of good character and the opposite of good morals. So punishment teaches our child what's in it for me. So if, I've got a picture here of a kid sneaking a cookie. If the kid is, say they would, if you sneak a cookie, you won't get dessert tomorrow, or something like that. They think, okay, sneaking cookies is bad because I might not get dessert tomorrow. Or instead of thinking, well, it breaks trust with my parent, and maybe, I know this is controversial in terms of like limiting sweets, but let's just go with it here for the example. Or, it makes me have more sugar than my parent thinks is good for me. So instead of thinking of the actual repercussions or the actual consequences to, going further out than this example, to property or community or, loved ones, or even to the child themselves, what they're thinking of is what will happen to me if I do this, instead of what's going to happen, say the hitting example. I'm not going to hit my brother because I don't want to lose the iPad privileges. What we want them to think is, I'm not going to hurt my brother because I don't want to hurt my brother, right? I don't want to hit my brother. Sorry, I'm not going to hit my brother because I don't want to hurt my brother. So we want kids to always be thinking of what are the ramifications of my actions on those around me, or property, or whatever, not like what's going to happen to me if I if I do this thing that I'm not supposed to do. And the other part of that is, if kids think that they can get away with it, they will, right? So it teaches kids who won't do the right thing when no one's looking, because the only reason why they're not doing the right thing in the first place is because they don't want to get caught, because they don't want to get punished. So you really want to teach kids like the all of the actual consequences of their actions, and that's why you don't want them to do things, not because something bad will happen to them. Finally, one of the biggest reasons for me not to use consequences is it hurts our relationship with our kids. I mentioned before that one of the big ideas of peaceful parenting is the focus on the relationship and focus on connection. It's really the only true influence we have over another person is our connection with them. If you had a boss that, when you made a mistake at work, called you out in front of everyone and yelled at you and docked your pay and made you stay late, how would you feel about that boss? Would you want to show up and do your best work for them, or would you start looking for another job? So punishment, really, when we feel like somebody's not on our side and they're trying to make us feel bad on purpose, we care less about that person and we care less about what that person thinks. And when you think about respect is actually caring what another person thinks. So if you want your children to truly, Kath, I think I did give some more examples. Let me know if I gave enough examples about the cookie thing. Basically, the example that, I used a cookie because it was just going against a rule that had been, a rule in the family, breaking a rule in the family. So, we really, if we want our kids to really respect us, we don't want to go and hurt. We want them to care what we think. In fact, my older son, this is when he graduated from high school. He's graduating from university next month. But when he was in high school, he said, Mom, so many of my friends don't tell their parents where they're going, or don't answer their texts, or don't even go home at night sometimes. And he said, a little bit disdainfully, you're really lucky that I care what you and Dad think, right? That respect piece. And he's right. Like, raising teenagers who care what you think is a huge part of what makes it easier. So our relationship with our child is really the only true influence we have over them, if we don't want to use power and control. There's a great quote from Thomas Gordon, who's one of the sort of founding thinkers of peaceful parenting. He says, the inevitable result of consistently using power to control your kids when they're young is you never learn how to influence. You can control a 4-year-old by, moving their body places, and, you have pretty much power over a small child, right? I'm not saying we should use that power, but you do have power over smaller children. As they get older, you don't have power over them anymore. But if you don't know how to influence them, they're not going to listen to you. I'm going to have a little more tea. So we need a new set of tools, and that's what we do inside the Transform Your Family Life course. Because if you want to drop out the conventional parenting tools of yelling, punishments, threats, etc., that fear and power-based parenting, you can't just drop that out and not put something in its place. If you do, you get a vacuum created, and the vacuum is where permissive parenting comes in. Permissive parenting, is no boundaries and basically chaos, right? So if you do drop out those tools of conventional parenting, you need to replace them with something else. And limits is one of the ways that we think about that. So as parents, we always have expectations for our child. They're going to be a little bit different depending on our, how old they are and who we are and what our values are and what our life is like. But we always have expectations for our child. And then sometimes we've got reality happening, which is reality is different than the expectations, right? So I always like to show it. Like this, like I've got my video back on for a second, that, expectations are here, reality's here. It's that gap in the middle where we get in trouble, right? When our kid's not doing what we want them to do, or they're doing something other than what we want them to do. And in that gap, we often find that conventional parenting will use yelling, consequences, threats to close the gap. That's why I call it a danger gap, because that's when we get frustrated and we don't know what to do. So I get distracted myself. I'm going to turn the video off again. So peaceful parenting uses limits instead of using those conventional parenting tools. So what's a limit? A limit is something that you put in place to help your child meet your expectation. So how do I get them to blah, 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 or how do I get them to stop blah, blah, blahing? So a limit is what is basically the support or scaffolding that we give our child to meet our expectation. So you think about the support and scaffolding that holds up a building. I realized that this picture is actually probably more for painting, but I think you get the picture. The scaffolding that holds up a building while it's being built. This is a term that's used a lot in education. The scaffolding that a student needs while they're learning new skills. The same thing with parenting. The scaffolding that our child needs while they're learning to do the right thing, or maturing, or their brains are developing, they're getting more experience. We're, as parents, we're that scaffold that supports them. And the scaffolding can be physical or it can be emotional. So there are two questions we want to ask ourselves before we set a limit. This is really, really important. And we go into this a lot in the course. The first module of the course is all about self-regulation. Is the first big idea. The second module is all about connection and why that's important. And then the third and fourth modules are all about limit setting. So we really go into really a lot of granular detail in the course about limit setting. So the first question we want to ask ourselves is it necessary? So, maybe your kid is, got to leave for school and they're refusing to get dressed. You ask yourself, is that limit necessary? Well, if they're naked, it probably is necessary. They've got to put something on. But if they're wearing pajamas, maybe they can go in their pajamas, right? Or maybe they want to wear something particular, and you don't think they're going to be, you think they'll be too hot or too cold, and you really want them to change into something else. Ask yourself, is this a necessary limit? Or can I put, if I'm afraid they're going to be too cold, can I put a sweater in their backpack? So we always want to ask ourselves, is the limit necessary? I worry a little bit that some people have interpreted peaceful parenting as, I'm still going to control my child, but I'm just going to be nice about it. I'm just going to use lots of empathy as I control my child. That is not it. The kind, firm limits come in for health and safety, right? And as I said, everybody's limits are going to be health, safety, and I'll say mental health too of the parents, right? So I'm not asking you to be a martyr, but so you always want to be balancing what you can say yes to versus what you have to say no to. So is the limit necessary is always a question we want to ask. The other question we want to ask ourselves is the limit reasonable and developmentally appropriate? So say you have a teenager who's got a really messy room and you want them to clean their room. It might not be reasonable. It's their room. And as I said, we all can have our different ideas, but I feel pretty strongly that we don't insist that older kids especially clean their rooms, or even younger kids, if it's important to us. We either do it with them. Well, I'm going to get into that a little bit, but we always want to ask ourselves, is this a reasonable limit? When our kids were little and their room was really messy, what we insisted on was something that came to be known as making your room beddable. And beddable meant that there was a path from the bed to the door in case they needed to get up in the night or we needed to go to them in the night. We didn't want to step on Legos. So there was always tons of Legos. So the limit was we had to make the bedroom beddable before bedtime. The other part of that, looking at the limit, is it developmentally appropriate? So maybe you've decided, okay, it is reasonable limit that once a week my kids have to, tidy up their toys. Is it developmentally appropriate to ask them to do it themselves? Maybe they don't have the executive function yet where they can do that on their own. So once we have decided that a limit is reasonable, necessary, and developmentally appropriate, we think to ourselves, and I gave a couple of, I started to give some examples. We think to ourselves, what do I need to do to help my child meet my expectation? So you decide your child does need to get dressed because they're naked and they can't go to school naked. In the course, we go over tons of ideas of how to find a win-win solution. So that's what sort of a limit can look like, is a win-win solution where I get what I want and my child gets what they want. So some of that might look like, the little kid here who doesn't want to get dressed. You make a game out of it, and the mom in this case is like pretending that her hand is a monster in the sleeve, and the monster is going to eat the little guy's hand, and that's how they get the other sleeve on. Or you see there's a baby, they have a baby in the picture, so maybe the child is feeling like they're a little resistant because of the new baby, and so the mom's going to pretend that the older child is a baby and get the child dressed that way. That's that support to meet the expectation. And maybe for the messy room thing, what do I need to do to help my child meet my expectation? Maybe your expectation, you disagree with me, and the room cleaning has to happen, and you're going to help, or you're even going to do it. So I have been known to make my kids' beds in the morning, which just involves throwing a duvet on, straightening out the duvet, because I can see my son's, before he moved out, I could see his bed from the kitchen. And sometimes it just bugged me to see an unmade bed. So I would, do the duvet myself, or I would shut the door. So in that case, I decided it was unreasonable to expect him to make his bed because it was important to me. So, but if you say you have younger kids and you got to tidy up every once in a while, maybe you find that win-win solution by doing it together, or making it fun, or even just scaffolding them to get organized, and depending on how old they are. So, okay, first everybody pick up all the books. Tell me when you're ready, and I'll time you, and we'll see how fast you can pick up all the books. So that's just some examples of that support or scaffolding to help kids meet that expectation. I've got some other examples coming up here. So say you've got, sorry, I'm just gonna have a little bit more tea here. Say you've got two kids who are playing with a hose in the yard, and one child is spraying their sibling, and the sibling is saying, "Stop it, don't spray me." And the child A is not listening to child B, who doesn't want to be sprayed with the hose. So the limit here is no spraying people with hoses unless they say it's okay. So is the limit necessary that you're going to have to stop child A from spraying child B with a hose? Yes, it is necessary, because it's not fair to child B to be sprayed with the hose without their consent. Bill, I will answer your question in the Q&A. Is it reasonable and developmentally appropriate? Yes, it is reasonable and developmentally appropriate for them to stop spraying their sibling with a hose. So I would try first finding a win-win solution, which is, hey, you can come over here and spray my feet, or even me if I'm in a bathing suit too, or whatever. Or you can spray the garden if you want to spray something, but no spraying your brother with a hose. He said no, he doesn't like it. If child A is still trying to spray their brother with a hose, I would say we're going to have to, it depends if child B still really wants to play with the hose, child A might just have to go and do something else. Come over with me, we're going to take a little break from the hose, or maybe the hose goes away, we turn it off. We're going to, you are having a hard time listening to your brother. And so we're going to turn off the hose for right now. We'll try again tomorrow. So some of you might be thinking, wow, Sarah, that actually sounds kind of like a punishment to, take the child out of the situation, or take the hose away, or put the hose away, or whatever. There's two major things that differentiate consequences and limits. Oh, sorry, I meant to give the examples here on that slide, but yeah, the examples of what we wanted to try to do, just, move them onto something else, distract them, and then finally they don't meet the expectation, and we might have to take the hose away, or take the child out of the situation. And yes, that could look like a punishment, or could be a punishment, depending on two things: tone and intent. So if we've asked 5 times and the kid is still not listening to us, we might not be feeling very, very compassionate, kind, or empathetic, and our tone will come across as angry, and our child will perceive that as a consequence. So it's always important to act early. This is something else we talk about a lot in the talk a lot about in the course is acting early. You know, ask once, and if you're not getting action, you have to do something. So that helps us be kind and empathetic with it. We don't give too many chances and wait too long. So we always want to look at our tone and then our intent. Are you trying to support the expectation or trying to make them feel bad or afraid? So if you took away the hose and said, you know, no hose for a week, you'll learn, you know, and you're thinking they'll learn the lesson that way, that would go into consequence or punishment territory because it is doing more than you need to do to support the expectation. Putting the hose away for the rest of the day, and maybe you even say, we'll try again in an hour or something, give them another chance. That's just helping to support the expectation that they don't spray their brother, right? So it's like, if your intent is to go so far as to make them feel bad rather than just supporting the expectation, you know, so another example might be if somebody's using, you know, a hard plastic toy and like, you know, throwing it in the house or banging it on a table or something like that, and you ask them to stop and they're not stopping, then you might have to take the toy away to protect the property in your house, right? We don't hurt people or things. But you're not going to take the toy away and then say you don't give it back for a week, or then I'm going to take away all your other toys so that you learn. You just are doing enough that you're supporting the expectation, which is not to use this plastic toy to bang on the wooden coffee table and scratch it and dent it. A lot of people, so the other thing that might happen when you set a limit, that also happens with punishment, but it's different in this sense, your child might feel bad about a limit that you've set. And it's okay if kids feel bad about limits. You know, if we've decided that they are necessary for health and safety, age appropriate and reasonable and developmentally appropriate, and our child is unhappy, that's part of life, right? They're gonna, you can tell yourself if you feel bad, they're learning resilience by being upset and then recovering. It's peaceful parenting is not about children never feeling bad. There are going to be lots of times as parents where we have to set limits that our kids aren't going to like. And that's okay. And that's our chance to show up and actually increase connection, be there with empathy. And really, you know, you remember the tree graphic, welcoming those feelings when our child is unhappy about a limit that we've set. You know, a lot of people say, well, how will they learn? Don't I need to do something else? Well, these examples that I've just given, you know, your child is using a hard plastic toy in a possibly dangerous way, and you take it away, they learn, and it might take a few times for them to learn, you know, they might not learn on the first time, but what they're learning is, oh, if I do X, then Y happens. If I bang this truck on the table, then it gets taken away. I better not bang the truck on the table. Or if I squirt my brother with the hose and he doesn't like it and I don't stop, I don't get to play with the hose anymore, right? So we want to think about the idea that you don't need to make kids feel bad to learn. Do you need to feel bad to learn? Like, that's a real question. And whenever I ask parents this, when I can see their hands or their faces, the answer is no. People don't need to make me feel bad to learn. I can learn without being made to feel bad. So yeah, I see your question, Laura, and I'll get to that in the Q&A. We're almost done. I wanted to save at least 15 minutes, and we're on time for that. So we don't need to make kids feel bad to learn things. They can learn things without feeling bad. And we want to remember that the limit is the lesson. As I just said, that limit is the lesson. The limit as it gets expressed by a parent is how they learn. So we're going to talk about the course for 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to Q&A. So I developed this course as like really comprehensive, all things peaceful parenting to help you stay calm no matter how nuts things get, be able to set those limits like a strong leader, and then also to work on that connection. I can't tell you how wonderful it's been having teenagers and now grown-up kids with that connection. My sons, who are, as I said, 20 and 23, they had spring break from university. They both go to University of Toronto. They had their spring break. They chose to spend with us on a family vacation. And they, you know, my middle son even said, the older I get, the more fun family vacations are. So that's what happens when you raise kids with peaceful parenting. As I said, these are all that we really focused on setting limits today, but you can see how these things all work together. So, you know, in that example with the hose, you just stop and regulate yourself. You may have heard the expression connect before you correct. So build like a tiny connection with your child before you start to take the hose away, or even, you know, try to get them to stop spraying. And the building cooperation piece was like, you know, do you want to spray the flowers instead of your brother? Empathy for the child when you might have to actually take the hose away and they're really sad, and then you have to welcome feelings. The only one that probably doesn't play into that, well, maybe you've had a really bad day and you're super annoyed at how your kids are acting, so you have to give yourself a lot of compassion for how hard parenting is. But this is how all of these things work together. So it's basically a roadmap. Like starting from the first module and the first lesson, going through is really like all the things you need to know about peaceful parenting. I'm going to kind of speed through the testimonials. They are on the website page for the course. There are a lot of testimonials. People with older kids have taken this, and this sentence was from a 2-page review that Wanda wrote me about the course afterwards. She has written to me actually a couple of times since she took the course 2 years ago to tell me how she's using peaceful parenting strategies in her neighborhood with other people. Like, it really did. She was not exaggerating when she said that. And it's never, so as I said, parents of older kids, Kath asked if its kid is preteen or teen. You're right, it's never too late. And it can take a little bit more time to change habits, but it is never too late. I know adults who wish they had a better relationship with their parents. So really, and especially in the teen years, the relationship part becomes even more important, and that's where you'd want to start. And I do, haven't said it yet, but we do have in the course office hours. This is just an example of what it looks like on the back side of the course. So there's 10, I can talk about the office hours in a second, specifically for you, Kath. We have 10, there are 10 modules, and each module, I know there are some courses out there that are just like a 1 hour long audio or something like that, which is really hard to find the time to do that. So I've broken it up into shorter modules lessons. They're all between like 3 and 15 minutes. There's audio only, there are transcripts, there are videos for however you like to take in content. And it's designed for busy lifestyle, basically. So the other part of the course, then this is what my favorite part of the course is office hours. So Kath, you've got an older kid, and it may be that having some personal support is going to be helpful for you with an older kid, because you know, some of the examples in the course might be for slightly younger kids, like I've given in the workshop today. Every single week for 12 weeks, we have office hours where you can drop in onto Zoom and talk to me or Corey and get your questions answered. So that is a really, really powerful part of the course. And a lot of people who've taken it have said that that was some of their favorite part of the course. As I said this in the beginning, but I'm not a special unicorn. It's just been raising kids with peaceful parenting has what's made these years so easy and my kids so great. Like, you know, I know everyone thinks their kids are great, but I just really think they're great. The other day, my daughter came home and she had a present for me. She'd gone to Lush, which is my favorite store that's like bath products, and she'd bought me some lotion and a bath bomb, and made me a beautiful card just because. She wrote, like, I know it's not Mother's Day yet, but I just wanted to tell you how much I love you, and bought me a present. Like, it's so sweet. She's 16. So this is the details on the course. There are 2 options. One is the course and the office hours standalone. It's $397 US, or 3 payments of $140 a month. That includes the course and lifetime access, and also the group coaching calls, the office hours. Option 2 is all of that plus one-on-one private coaching with me. Again, there's installments available on that. There is a money back guarantee. If within the first 30 days you show me that you've done the coursework but it's not for you, and you don't want to do it anymore, I will cheerfully give you your money back. So I figured out the other day that about 260 parents have gone through this course and over the last couple of years, and I haven't had a single person ask me for their money back. So that tells me that the course is pretty good. I mean, I know it's good. I really have carefully developed it. So you can go to, let me just go through, I want to make sure we have time for questions. Again, a lot of these testimonials are on the page, the website page. For the first 5 people who sign up, not only will you get the 12 weeks of office hours that go along with the course, but I'm also going to give you 3 months inside my Peaceful Parenting membership, which also has office hours every week. So you'll get 6 months of support for those first 5 people who sign up for the course. You'll get that 6 months to really, really make some changes and go along. So 30, as I said before, money back guarantee within 30 days. You have until Tuesday night to decide if you want to join us. The course starts on Wednesday. I'm not going to offer this at least again until the winter. I usually offer it twice a year. You can go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/parenting course to check it out. And yeah, I know it's a lot of time and money and hard work, but it really will make a big difference in your family and your parenting if you do if you do show up and do the work. So again, you can go to this page, reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/parenting course. There are FAQs there. There's more stories from parents. There's more course details. And I hope to see you inside the course. So here's the printable little gift. I'm just going to grab the URL and pop it in the chat for you. And it's just a little download. Thank you for coming. And here's that. If you would like to download that, it's like a printable of some of the stuff that we've gone over today. Okay, let's do questions. I'm going to stop my slides here and come back to you and the questions. So I'll start with the questions that are in the chat. And then if you have a question, go in the chat, go for it. So Bill says, what if my expectation is that my 11-year-old's bedroom needs to be somewhat clean, clothes put away, no food or cups in there? Is that unrealistic? I think it's totally a realistic limit to say that you can't have dishes in your room. It's a health issue. So I would say you have 2 choices to your child. I'd say this: either no eating in your room, or you have to make sure that you don't, at the end of the day, there's no cups or dishes in there, unless it's like a water glass or something like that. I think that's totally a reasonable limit. And it's one of those things that you work with your child to understand the big why about that. In terms of there was another part, clothes put away. You can set your own limits. That's the beauty of everybody being different. I personally did not set the limit of your clothes had to be put away. But if I found laundry, like dirty clothes and clean clothes mixed together, I wouldn't do their laundry. That's my labor that's going to waste. So if they're not going to put their clothes away, our joke was, so my 20-year-old just moved out, or he's moving out this weekend. And we were joking about the furniture that he needs to get for his new place. And I was telling my dad, we're going to buy him a bed for his new place, and he'll probably have to get a dresser. And then I said, oh, scratch that. He usually just keeps all of his clothes in the laundry bin that I give him. So maybe he won't need a dresser. That was not a limit that was important to me, that he put his clothes away. It's his room. As I said, I shut the door if I don't want to look at it. And if he was mixing together clean clothes and dirty clothes, and I was finding clean clothes in the laundry, I would not do his laundry. The other part of it was a limit that I set for this child in particular was, and I say this is a fair limit, no wet towels on the floor. That was a limit that was important to me. Their room could be messy, but they were not allowed to leave wet towels on the floor. So this one particular kid, I would every day, I think from when, he started bathing himself, for 3 years, I would say towel. I'd see him, he'd shower, go to his room, come out without his towel. I say towel. He'd go back and get his towel and hang it up. It took a little while, but it became muscle memory, and he never, ever, ever leaves a wet towel in his room. It's a cute, predictable thing, or it was till he's moved out, where he showers, he goes back in his room, and he comes tromping back out with his towel and goes and hangs it up in the bathroom. So yes, Bill, I hope that was helpful. You can set whatever limits you want, but just things I like it when your room is clean, so you have to clean your room. to me doesn't seem reasonable. Or I like it when your bed is made, so you have to make your bed, to me also doesn't seem reasonable. And honestly, I have been known to go into this kid's room because, as I said, it's right off the kitchen, and, you know, pick up some clothes off the floor and make the bed if I don't feel like looking at it and I don't feel like shutting the door. And, you know, I don't know, it's also kind of a loving, supportive thing to do. My daughter, on the other hand, she is so neat and clean, and her room is always beautiful. Like, it looks like it could be out of a decorating magazine. And she had the same lack of me insisting that she cleans her room. So Kath says, if there's no consequence when the limit's not met and explained, like eating in the room and dishes not taken out, well, there would be a limit. Like, we've agreed that we're not going to leave dishes. I think I kind of hinted at that, but maybe it wasn't explicit. We're not going to leave dishes in the room past the end of the day. And if you do, you're not allowed to eat in your room. So that would be the limit that I would set. And it wouldn't be a natural consequence that you can't eat in your room. That would be a limit. The natural consequence of leaving dishes in the room would be moldy, dirty dishes or bugs, right? So, you know, this is something, especially with older kids, you know, you're not coming down as like the police. You are saying like, hey, we've got to work on this. If you can't bring your dishes out, you know, do you want me to remind you? If you can't bring your dishes out, you're just not going to be able to eat in there because we don't want to get bugs. I hope that answered it. Okay, so Laura says, can you talk about how peaceful parenting handles the child when you remove them from the host situation? My 3-year-old usually flails and cries when I remove her from the situation. That's the welcoming feelings part, Laura, that we were talking about when I showed on the tree, and cultivating empathy. Yes, most kids would be upset when you remove them from the situation. Same, you know, kind of situation if you're, you know, at a gathering, say you're at a birthday party and your kid is just off the walls and not behaving appropriately. You might have to leave the birthday party, or at least go and take a break outside in your car or whatever, because they're not meeting your expectations about behavior that you do at a guest or at somebody's house that you're visiting. And they're not going to be happy about that necessarily. But, you know, if it is a necessary limit and a reasonable limit, then it's okay if they're upset, and you have to just sit through the meltdown. Okay, let me have some more tea. Kath, how old is your child? I think you said preteen teen. How to set the limit, or what to do to address the expectation of washing hands after using the toilet. He actually rarely washes and caught COVID frequently, bringing it home and infecting the family. Calmly asking if he washed gives the response I want to hear, not actually the truth, which is obvious, but I don't want to shame when I see a dry sink. So this seems like, yeah, I'm with you about the hand washing. And I actually would insist when my kids came home, like, we would come in the house and our 2 things we said, shoes off, wash hands. And it became that muscle memory. And now, like, every time anyone comes in our house, even our kids' friends, they go straight to the bathroom and wash their hands. And it took lots and lots of reminding and explaining to have that be muscle memory. So I think you said you have a preteen. Oh no, Kath, I forget how old your child is. Maybe not that young. 14. Okay. So I think that you have a sit down and talk about the big why, and, you know, say, do you want me to show you pictures of germs under a microscope from the internet? I don't want to, you know, I would even say, like, I don't want to baby you, and this is really gross to not wash your hands when you come in. There's, you know, if maybe they take public transit or the bus home from school, and just say, like, we really don't want, I mean, in terms of the COVID thing, I don't think you can you get, is it true still? Like, I know they used to think hand washing was important for COVID, but I'm not sure it's that important for COVID anymore. I don't want to get into a big COVID thing, but I do agree with you on the washing of the hands. But I think COVID is mainly from breathing it in, isn't it? Not hand washing, but still, you can look at pictures on the internet of germs. You can look at studies about hand washing and people getting sick. But I would really have like an information session and just say, this is really important. When you move out, if you don't want to wash your hands, that's totally fine. But if you're living here with us, one of the rules is that we wash our hands when we come home. Maybe you can make a joke even. Maybe you just get some hand sanitizer. And if he doesn't want to wash his hands, As soon as he comes in the house, you meet him. You know how they, like I was just at the emergency room on the weekend, and when you walk through the door, they give you a squirt of hand sanitizer. Maybe it's that. And maybe he says like, oh, mom, that's babyish, and say, okay, fine, wash your hands then. But this is one of those things that I would just have, like, I would talk about it until he's tired of it. I would keep talking about it until he's tired of it. Offer the hand sanitizer. If you don't want that, then wash your hands. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. Jane says, how do we address preteen 11-year-old eye-rolling sass and much more subtle negative behavior, such as not whispering when her sister's sleeping, not giving her sister enough room on the sofa, constantly telling her sister she's not good enough? I've already read loads about sibling rivalry. Any more tips? Okay, so your question is sort of two questions in one. And I do see, I think there's some questions in the Q&A also. Yeah, I see two more there. Okay. So your question is sort of two questions, Jane. The teen sass and attitude. So teenager, early teen, so tween and early teen years, where they're at in their brain development is that they're kind of like big toddlers. The brain renovates itself twice in childhood, once from little kid to big kid and once from big kid to adult. While that's happening, the part of the brain that's responsible for impulses and emotions, the amygdala and the limbic system, is much stronger than the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain with executive function, planning, logic, thinking, all of that, right? So at an 11-year-old, there's going to be a lot of drama. There's going to be, and it's real. Like, those feelings are real. They're very big, and that part of their brain is stronger and more powerful than the part of their brain that is that can, control their impulses and their emotions. So some of that is just coming with the age. One of the things we really work on with that age group and teenagers is not taking it personally. So, not taking it personally. If you really feel like you don't like how they're talking to you, although I really would caution you more to lean less heavily on changing the behavior, and I would lean more heavily on working on connection and not taking it personally. But you can say something like, where I would draw the line is at yelling at you, right? That's where I would draw the line. I'd say eye rolling, sighing, whatever. I just would let that go. But if somebody's yelling at you, I'd say, I really can't listen to what you're saying when you're yelling. Let's take a break and we'll talk about this when we're calm. And you walk away from an older child who's yelling at you. And I really want to hear what you're saying, but I don't want to be yelled at. I don't like being yelled at. So there's a large part of it that we just don't take personally at this age group. And the other aspect is the stuff about when she's not listening to things that you're asking her, like not with. So this is, yeah, I don't know if she's an older sister or a younger sister. Sounds like probably younger. Really, it sounds like working on connection with this child, because that, you said you've read loads about sibling rivalry. We have a whole unit, a module on sibling rivalry in the course, but it is always about who does mom or dad love more, right? And it sounds like even though you've read about it, there may be some things that you're missing, some of the practices that you're missing in really addressing that sibling rivalry. So yeah, you got a 2 for there, 2 answers. One, that teen attitude. Yeah, her sister's 9. I could have figured that it was a younger sister. So part of it is really working on that connection. And I want to be clear to everybody, connection is not the same as love. I know you love your kids and I know they love you, but connection is that part is like hearing what somebody else thinks. And it could be that, Jane, sounds like things maybe have been a little bit fraught, and working on the connection with her could also make her listen to you more when you say, like, can you please whisper because your sister's sleeping? She cares what you think, right? And I'm not saying it's like dramatically bad or anything, but maybe just working on that connection a little bit might help, even with the sibling, help her listen to you about the sibling rivalry. But it's really that the practices, I think, that you can put in place about the sibling rivalry. Okay, let's see. Chris says, mine sometimes protest about having to wash their hands when we come home, and sometimes they need reminding to do it for eating or preparing food too. Yeah, for sure. Like show me a teenager or a child that does their chores without asking or does everything perfectly the first time. There's always going to be a certain amount of, you can call it nagging or you can call it reminding, but it's part of how they're learning. Remember I said the limit is lesson. and it doesn't happen the first time necessarily. It's just like over and over again. It literally was probably like a year or 2 years of me reminding my kid to hang up his towel. And now it's like he even, if he has friends over and they leave their towel in his room, he gets annoyed and it's like, can you hang up your towel, please? Right? It's become that important. Okay. Janina says, if setting the limit and explaining it, for example, of screen time, and I show empathy, my 11-year-old responds, so you understand, then why can't you give me more minutes? I love that, Janina. And oh, hi, Janina. And, you know, I would say let me just think for a second, because I had this line that I said when my kids were younger. I would say, you know what, it would be so much easier for me to give you more minutes. And I do understand that you want more minutes. And at the same time, this is important for your health and safety. And I'm, you know, to be a good parent, I need to set this limit. Maybe you don't say set this limit, but, you know, it's basically like it'd be easier for me to say yes. And this is the line I was trying to get at. Be easier for me to say yes, but I love you enough to say no. Because kids do recognize, like, yes, I could give you unlimited screen time and my life would actually be easier. But you can say, like, this is important and I love you enough to go through you being upset with me to set this limit because it's better for you, right? And you know, that's always, I just was working with a client the other day who said the same thing, that when they give empathy, their kids like, well, fine, then change it. You know, if you understand how upset it makes me, then change it. Well, and you can say, you know what, and I wouldn't be being a good parent then if I just let you do X, Y, Z because it made you upset. This is important for health and safety. And let's see. Mira says, what do you do when they yell at you? You walk away and they keep yelling and hitting the table with their hand. So I would talk about this at another time when you're not yelling, and just say, like, you know, I really don't want us to yell at each other. I think it really hurts our relationship. And if either of us are upset, so even if it's you are always calm and they're the ones who are yelling, don't say when you are yelling and upset, but talk about us together. If either of us is upset or yelling, we'll never be able to solve the problem. We need to take a break and calm ourselves down. And that is totally true. And you can tell your kid that. I think it was years and years before I realized that my husband and I never once solved anything in a fight. Because when you're in a fight, your fight or flight instinct is activated and you can't actually think clearly and solve any problems because that part of your brain is not active. So you always need to go away and calm down before you can solve anything. So you talk to your child ahead of time. If either of us is feeling upset, either of us is yelling, we're going to need to take a break. And I promise that we'll come back and we'll talk about it and we'll work it out. I really don't want to yell at you and I really don't want you to yell at me. So if any of that's happening, we're going to have to take a break. So that's what I would do. And again, was what Chris said is I just persevere with them and they usually click quite quickly. And it's all about perseverance, right? Priya says, I'm going to go to the other Q&A for a second. Amber says, what if you have a limit and they don't meet it, like the dishes in their room? I think I answered that one already when I said that they wouldn't be allowed to eat in their room. Sarah says, any tips for strengthening the roots of self-regulation? Yes, it is very hard. It always feels like there's no space. So there's like a scientific statement talking about the space between stimulus and response, right? There always is. There's the stimulus, and then there's the response. And there always is time between the stimulus and then the response happening. Oftentimes it feels like very, very, very small, right? Like almost like you can't even identify it. Like it feels like it's non-existent, but there's always a response there. And as I said, the whole first module of the course is about self-regulation. We go really deeply into that and with basically tools to follow. So strengthening the roots, one thing, if you feel like you have, you can't even stop, drop, and breathe because that response comes on so quickly, spend some time doing visualizations when you're out of the situation. So say you had a particularly, bad morning and yelled at your kids in the morning. When you take a moment in the day or even that night, bring yourself back to that situation, recall it with as much detail as possible, how you felt, what was happening, what they did, what you did, how you yelled. Really try to really bring up the situation again and then picture yourself responding a different way, right? It's called visualization. Athletes use it, visualize themselves doing the perfect vault or whatever. You can do that too. Use visualization to start to create those neural pathways. Because when you respond in a different way in real time, you're creating your new neural pathways. When you picture yourself responding in a different way, you're also putting in new neural pathways. So that's the first step to start to strengthen that self-regulation. You know, then there are other pieces too of like making sure your resources aren't too low. Doing something, when, as I said earlier, if you ask someone to do something or stop doing something and they don't listen the first time, and that's also, we also cover in the course, getting their attention in an effective way, but they don't listen the first time, you have to do something to support that expectation. But if we ask and we ask and we ask and we ask, and then we lose it, then, we're training our kids not to listen to us until we yell. And we're also spending more time yelling because we're not being effective. Okay. I've got Priya and Chris. Everybody get in your last questions because we're gone over the hour. If anyone has any more questions after Chris, make sure you get them on because we're going to wrap this up. I do hope to see you all in the course. Priya says, can you talk about situations where natural consequences are not immediately apparent, like saying unfriendly or unkind words, shouting at others, screaming, etc., not only when they're upset or angry, but most of the time. Natural consequences may be that other people's feelings are hurt or they feel sad, but what if that's not motivating enough to try being kind next time, age 4 to 5? Okay, I'm really glad you put the age in there, because 4-year-old, even a 5-year-old, do not have impulse control yet. Remember when I said that the brain renovates itself from little kid to big kid? So part of what comes with that renovation, okay, so let me just use Dan Siegel's hand model here. So this is Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. So this is the amygdala and limbic system, my thumb that I've got here. And then when I close my fingers down over my thumb, this is the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is, as I mentioned before, where we've got logic, executive function, thinking, planning, all of that, like, clear-headedness, thinking brain, we call it. When we get upset and into fight, flight, or freeze, we do what's called, Dan Siegel calls, flipping our lid. And the brain activity comes from the amygdala or the limbic system, right? When you flipped your lid, your brain, your body perceives the feelings that you're having as an emergency, and the fight or flight instinct is activated. So in order for us to not flip our lid, we have to be able to engage. Our thinking brain has to be able to stay engaged at the same time as our impulsive brain or our amygdala. So if your 4-year-old or 5-year-old gets upset about something and they, you said no to something or whatever, and they start screaming and shouting, or they, they're upset enough that their nervous system gets activated into fight or flight and they start screaming and shouting. What basically, for them to not scream and shout when they get upset, their thinking brain would have to be able to stay online and say, like, don't scream and shout, or it'll hurt somebody's feelings or make them sad or scare them or whatever. So both of those parts of the brain are active at the same time, if that makes sense. So say somebody says something to you as a grown-up, makes you really, really angry and you want to punch them in the face, but you're not going to punch them because it would hurt them or you'd get arrested or whatever the consequences might be. So you're like, I want to punch this person in the face, but I'm not going to punch them. That's your amygdala is acting up. I want to punch the person. Your prefrontal cortex is putting on the brakes saying, don't punch that person. So back to your question, in a child who is younger than 7, that ability for their, and even can be older for more sensitive kids or neurodivergent kids, it can be older than 7, that impulse control, which is the prefrontal cortex saying, don't do that, to the impulses of the amygdala, does not exist until it doesn't start to be reliable. It doesn't start to be, oh my gosh, I've been talking for too long. Impulse control doesn't start to be reliable when someone's upset or excited until somewhere between the ages of 5 to 7, or even older for more sensitive or neurodivergent kids. So for somebody who's 4 or 5, 4-year-olds still don't have the ability to do impulse control when they're upset. Someone who's 5 is just at the beginning of the window. And some of you might be saying, well, my kid, is only 4 and they don't scream or hit people. It's because they don't have the impulses. It's not that they're thinking, I'm going to scream and hit people, but I won't because I don't want to, you know, I don't want to upset someone. They just don't have the impulses, right? So all kids have the equal amount of brain development. It's actually like a brain wiring thing. So back to this example of the hand model. So when this Dan Siegel calls this the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain is the prefrontal cortex, he talks about a staircase between the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain, which connects them so that you can be in both parts of your brain at the same time, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Before that, ages of 5 to 7 or older, there's no staircase yet. And in individuals with ADHD, even adults, that and also other types of neurodivergence, that connection is weaker and self-regulation is harder. So I hope that makes sense. So my point, Priya, is that we focus on calming and managing the meltdown rather than trying to, I'm glad I circled back here. We focus on calming and managing the meltdown. We look at what situations bring us here. Can we avoid some of those? Are there ways to not get into the meltdown? Rather than trying to get a child to change their behavior based on what the natural consequences are of their behavior. And thanks for your chat, Chris. So I don't see any more questions. I'm going to end. Thank you everyone for coming. And let me know if you have any questions about the course or anything else. I will see you hopefully in the course or in the Facebook group or around, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Bye everyone.